All right, guys, very special guest coming on, Stacking Pennies, performing a 90-minute set after our Coke 600 qualifying on Saturday night. Owner of 10 number one hits, Jake Owen, right here on Stacking Pennies. Thanks for coming on.
What's up?
Oh, just having a little fun, man, like we do each and every week. But we don't get to talk to musicians very often. Usually just some race car driver that I beat and bang with each and every week. But definitely interesting. I want to talk to you a little bit right here on the show. Something that's always fascinated me about musicians. We went with Kip Moore at Homestead last year on stage. That was a pretty cool interview as well. But how you guys always are like reintroducing yourself or like always developing your music and evolving over the course of your long career. How's that process been?
Great question. And thank you guys again for having me. This is really cool to be able to chat with y'all as well. I don't usually get to rap with guys like you either. So this is cool for me. And, I've been really fortunate, as Kip said as well, to have a longer career, and something that I've had the opportunity to grow and kind of figure out kind of through the process, who I am, what I want to say, maybe who I was, who I don't want to be anymore. And I think that's part of the journey of making music in general. But I just turned 41 this past year. So I'm a lot different than I was as the 23-year-old kid that got a record deal. And so when it comes to music, I think there's things I can say and talk about now that I wasn't or hadn't even fathomed experiencing at that age of 23. So I feel like I'm in my prime though, man. Like I feel like I'm in the happiest times of my life and got two beautiful little girls. One's 4 and one's 10. And they've changed my life. And so life is good, man. I tend to try to hopefully revolve a lot of my music around that.
Man, kids, well, both of us here, we have two, and they definitely change you in for all the better ways, a lot of ways you didn't expect. But something that I found super interesting when I was doing some research on you of how many guys that people recognize you've toured with: Jason Aldean, Brooks and Dunn, Alan Jackson. I mean, the list goes on and on. What's it like to have those guys, to learn from them how to do it right and how to be a long career in the game?
It's something, my dad told me a long time ago. I'm really fortunate. I tend to always credit and quote my mom and dad in life and stories I tell, just because they gave me a good, solid upbringing. But my dad always said, if you want to be the best at something, make sure you surround yourself with the people that are. And I've been real fortunate since the early days to, like you said, the first tour I ever went out on was with Brooks and Dunn and Alan Jackson, like co-headlining. And those guys were like heroes of mine growing up. So to learn from them and see how they treat their crew members and take care of people and how they put on a show to the highest level was something that I was real fortunate to learn from as like an early kid. And then going out with Kenny Chesney for a lot of years, a lot of summer times, being out there with him. I love just like kind of that so-called ethos that he creates out there with his touring team. And those guys out there do anything for that guy. And it's because of the way he treats them. And I think the reason they've been successful for so many years is because of the way that he takes care of his people. And I think y'all probably see it out there in the NASCAR world too. Guys that have great camps and they lift up their team members around them. There's not a lot of like controversy or stuff happening. When everybody seems to be pulling for one another and on the same page and going towards the same goal, it tends to always not only feel, even when you're not winning per se, it still feels good to be out there chasing the dream and chasing the win. And I've been fortunate to learn from that type of feeling, and I try to incorporate it into my day-to-day life.
Man, you're no stranger to NASCAR. You and Kevin Harvick and Josh Jones been buddies for a long time, represented Budweiser. And I believe there's an infamous story about one of your phalanges getting more or less chopped off on a go-kart out on that track. Yeah. Is that true?
Here's the good hand. Here's the messed up.
Oh, so there was, and I could elaborate and put some context on it. So it wasn't Harvick's track. It was his next door neighbors had this sweet high bank go-kart track, long straightaways. I believe a Budweiser or two was probably involved in this story. And maybe I think it was Harvick's 40th. There was some sort of substantial party.
It was Delena's 40th birthday.
Delena's. And you tried to rifle off a heater, and what happened?
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. Yeah, I did try to rifle off a heater because it's not every day. Like I told you, talking to you guys, but it's not every day that you just get to hop in like a badass go kart. And I knew it was serious when Kevin handed me gloves. He gave me racing shoes, the whole deal, and I just took a bank corner a little high, and I believe it was Bowyer kind of came low and tried to get me, and when I came down, I didn't want to hit him, so I yanked the wheel. And when I did, man, I rolled that sucker twice, and my hands were on the wheel, and I guess when I rolled so fast that the wheel hit the pavement and just smashed my hand and finger. And by the way, my good buddy Kevin, I still have it hanging in the bar room at my barn. I've got that steering wheel from that go-kart all smashed in where my hand was. And he's got a picture of he and I under it when I was in a sling the next day.
Oh, no.
But then under it says first place. So that's a good story. I always tell people. I'm not so sure it's Delaina's favorite part of her 40th birthday, but we definitely spent some time in the hospital.
Corey's got a memorable moment from out there. He said it was the most embarrassed he's ever been in his life. You mind telling that one from Harvick's?
That was a different go kart track, but I'll tell you because
it was at Harvick's though, right?
No, it was at Bowyer's. Bowyer had a dirt track.
Okay.
So Harvick had an asphalt track. Bowyer had a dirt track. I was probably 16, and there was like they had temporary grandstands, probably 300-400 people. You probably went. So we leave right from baseball practice, and I was wearing the trend back in the day was triple XL sweatpants with like Northwest Polaris baseball on. So I go and I'm sitting there like arms crossed, and Dad would always give me about those sweatpants because he just didn't like them. So I'm standing around, I'm talking to Delaina, there's like 3 or 4 others. And next thing I know, I'm just standing there, and next thing I know, it got really breezy. And I looked down, and I was bare ass. My dad had pants me to the ground, and right in front of that temporary grandstand in front of 300 or 400 people. So you might have been there that night, and you probably got a show that you didn't anticipate for. But a show that people can anticipate and can look forward to is Saturday night for the Coke 600, man. Haven't seen you around a NASCAR track in a little while. What's it mean to be back on Memorial Day weekend?
Well, anytime I get to kind of, bring some music, especially and get it in, really get, involved with NASCAR is a big deal for me. So NASCAR's been really good to me over the years, and to have me back, especially at the big 600, is really cool. Play the infield, see Kevin there on his last race there at 600, and I'm pretty fired up to see that and play some music. And Memorial Day weekend, like you said, it's kind of the kickoff to boating season, and I got a new album coming out. It's like it all together feels pretty good.
Man, I wanted to ask you 3 questions that I ask all the guests, most of which are drivers, so I'm going to tailor them a little bit to yourself. So the question number 1 generally is, if you had to pick one car and one racetrack to race at the rest of your life, I know you're not going to pick a go-kart at Harvick's go-kart track. If you had to play one song at one venue for the rest of your life, what do you go with?
One song at one venue? I've been asked a lot of questions. I've never been asked that one. Wow. I don't know. I mean, I think any song, honestly, to have an opportunity anytime. Like, I think about that a lot. I think about the days of just wanting people to care about my music when I was down in Tallahassee, Florida, and my twin brother would sit on a bar stool with his one other buddy, and that'd be like the only other person than the bartender. And he would be there for me. And I remember thinking, man, one day if I ever make it, Jared's going to be pretty proud of me. And all these years later, to think that, to even come there to the 600 and play this coming weekend, and all those people that'll be there, any chance I get to play anywhere. I know this is a roundabout answer to your question. I don't know that I have the right answer for it, but I do know that if I can just play one song anywhere and people listen and care, that makes somebody like me feel completely elated as far as feeling like you made it, So, I don't know. The Ryman's a pretty cool spot in Nashville. If I had to pick one last time to play a song, that'd be probably a cool spot, and I'd probably play one of my favorite old country songs, not one of mine.
Yeah.
But man, just getting to do this for a living is pretty cool.
So I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on that because I find that interesting. I'll save 2 and 3 for a little bit. At what point of your career, I feel like it's a pretty distinct shift for musicians in particular, of when they're facing just a headwind, going to dive bars, grinding it out for tips, to where all of a sudden it like switches and you hit it big. Was there a moment in time or like a season where you're like, oh shoot, I'm getting a little bit of traction at this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I moved to Nashville, it was such an eye-opening experience because, as I said earlier, my dad said, if you want to be the best, surround yourself with people that are. And thought I was good in Tallahassee, Florida, but until I got to Nashville and surrounded myself with a bunch of other people that were so much better than me and still are, it just makes you work harder. It makes you really realize that you got to step your game up. So I would say that when I moved here is probably when things started. Like, I could tell people were buying into what I was doing. People in the business getting behind you and having them wave your flag is a cool thing. Just feeling a part of the community is, I think, the best part. You feel like you made it.
Do you ever wonder, because you're a scratch golfer, played in a pro-am, you were a wakeboarder, and then you got injured, I believe, which dismantled the golf career. Do you ever wish that you would have stuck with one or the other, or are you pretty content with what you're doing?
Man, I don't ever think about what could have been.
What about when you see like those live contracts they're signing right now? Do you maybe just think a little bit about what could have been?
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. Those guys are making some good money, but I really don't, man. I've tried to live my life on the what can be instead of the what could have, because you can't really ever do anything. You can't change what has happened, but you can change what's gonna happen by just putting your mind towards something. And to be real, like I said earlier, like I got two beautiful little girls, and if anything would have changed along the way, that I wouldn't have had them probably the way I have. And so many things in my life would have never happened if it wasn't for the things that did. And so I always embrace the past, and I'm excited that my life has turned out the way it has, and I wouldn't change it for anything. And yeah, that's that.
What can be sounds like the next #1 hit. Start writing that thing up.
Yeah.
Let's go. Question number 2 is, what is the most embarrassed you've ever been, for the general questions, at the racetrack or on stage?
I did rip my jeans open one night. I had some jeans on that were pretty tight. I was in North Charleston, actually, and I used to cover in my set. I don't remember who I was on tour with. I think it was like Al Dean or Keith Urban or something. And I used to, at the end of our show, we'd play Van Halen's Jump. And so I'd always try that David Lee Roth jump off the drum riser, just full split, you know what I mean? Just trying to just full on rock it. And I did that night, and I ripped the jeans wide open, and there it was, man. And in that moment, I had to just kind of like, speaking of you getting pantsed, you know what I'm saying? Like it was bad. And so I turned around, tried to figure it all out, and finished the show. But it was pretty embarrassing, that's for sure.
You know what I would call that? I would call that the bare-ass blue jean night.
There you go. There you go. I told you. Yeah, we had a few things we called that evening for sure. Yeah, that was a bare-ass blue jean night.
Question number 3 is, if you had to lose every single one of your career-related memories, but only keep one, what do you keep?
I think I would. Man, you're asking some great questions.
I get a lot of practice.
The feeling that I get if I had to get rid of everything from accolades to, to thankfully the life I've been able to lead and live and support my family with. Like, if you took all that away, and I could only just be left with one thing, it would genuinely be that feeling that you get when you realize that you can genuinely make someone happy, right? Like you really, like when people accept you into their lives and they play, like I get texts all the time, like from people or photos on Instagram or videos where someone, that not only grew up liking my music, but now maybe married and they use that song as their wedding song, or they had children and they now are bringing their kids up with my music, and those types of feelings, I never thought that would ever happen, like that I could be a part of someone's life or make them happy. So I will take that day in and day out, because at the end of the day, no matter how many accolades you have, no matter how much money you can make, you can't take that with you when you go. But what you leave behind is important, and leaving behind an impression on somebody that you were a good person, that you did good for people, that you made them smile, I'll hang my hat on that.
I could appreciate that answer. So generally, too, when we talk to a driver, they can kind of pinpoint like one race in their career, like the perfect car, right? Like, our car was so good that day, losing was not even an option. and they would want to go drive that car at that track for the rest of their life. Is there a particular guitar? You play a lot of instruments, but is there a particular guitar that like you find yourself gravitating towards if you could?
Yeah. I've kept kind of most of all my guitars on the road with me for a long time. My dad gave me a pink Paisley Telecaster when I was in college. It was a big deal to get that kind of guitar. And my dad, bought it for me. And when I moved to Nashville, it needed to be updated and the pickups changed out in it. And my buddies painted it for me. And so now it's this Sparkle Telecaster. And I've had it for 20 years at least on the road. And I just love playing that guitar. It reminds me of when I was a kid. Every time I grab it, it's still the same guitar. It's just got a different paint job. But it's that guitar, like when I pick it up, I'm like, I played this guitar in a bar in Tallahassee, but I've also played it at the Daytona 500, So it's it's those type of feelings, I think, that takes you back to like being a kid. And I think you always have to remember those feelings.
Something too, I found it interesting. You asked Ryan before we jumped on here, the difference of 5 lug nuts to 1 lug nut, how much different it is, right? Where in your career, from the time you've been 23 to where you are currently at 41, like the act of songwriting and being a musician isn't the same.
Oh, no.
How does it change? Are you looking at what the audience is wanting to hear, or are you making what feels good to you?
So great question, because what a lot of people don't realize, I got my record deal in 2006. So you got to figure that's like 16 years ago. And that was before there was like iTunes wasn't out in 2006. And this makes me sound dated. I mean, I'm 41 years old. I don't feel old. But it's wild how much has changed from not only when you think about it musically, but even in the business of NASCAR. And so, there was no iTunes, there was no streaming. Like when you put an album out, I remember going standing in the stores at Target, Walmart, all those places with the actual physical CD and sign it, and people come in. That's where you went to get it. And nowadays you're just telling people, make sure you go to Spotify or Pandora, wherever you stream your music, Apple. And so I've lost a little bit of that connection when it comes to music release week. But it's been incredible the way you can reach people digitally now that we could never do. We can release songs quicker now than we were able to do then. But yeah, it was interesting listening to you telling me about how even though you're down to 1 lug nut, that it can still be as hard. And I'll quickly share something with you. A long time ago, I asked a guy that is on a pit crew, and this is like maybe even 10 years ago. You remember? I mean, I guess it's 10 years ago. How long ago did Toyota come in to NASCAR?
Yeah, a little more than 10 years ago, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember asking. This is a funny story. I remember saying, "Man, this is a dumb question," but I was like, "Chevy, Ford, you crank on American engine, and it sounds like an American engine. You know what I mean? Like Toyota, you crank up your normal Toyota out anywhere in a parking lot, it's like doesn't sound like an American car." So I was like, is that a dumb question? Like, what's those Toyotas sound like out there? I'll never forget that dude. He goes, sounds like they're hauling ass is what it sounds like.
Some weeks.
Yeah. Well, we can get into the weeds on that, but that is a great question. You would anticipate it sounding like a Prius, but it doesn't. Right. They haul pretty good ass.
The weird part about the Toyotas, a little tidbit, is when they fire them up in the garage for the race, they smoke like they're fogging a field for like bugs. Really? Oh my God. Yeah. Do they still do that? Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Their first fire up, I don't know what it is, and they obviously do it on purpose, but they smoke really bad. Not like these American cars.
Nope. We don't burn oil because that's bad for the environment. Jake,
right.
It's been a little while since you've had a #1 hit. You got anything in the works you're about to lay down for the all the consumers ready to hear some new stuff?
Yeah, man. I appreciate you asking. I have a new album coming out next month, June 24th. I have 4 songs actually coming out this week that are kind of the pre-order to that album. And it's perfect timing for me being a Floridian and Memorial Day weekend. People are putting the boats, like for us, like Memorial Day weekend rolls around and like people start putting the boats back in the water. It's time to go for the summertime. So we're going to put out like a little 4-song summertime playlist, kind of as a prelude to the album being dropped on the 24th. And and hopefully there's some hits on there for sure.
So one thing too, and I appreciate your time here, spending a lot of good time with us, is like the work behind an album, just the amount of work, because people think it's rock star living, red carpets and motorhomes and all this stuff, and they forget about or don't know how much work in solitude, whether it's on the simulator in my case, whether it's in the booth, record and things like that on your end. What are some things that from the outside looking in, people don't know what the extent of being an artist is?
Don't get me wrong, man. It's not digging ditches or anything, but it's definitely it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Team. I think what I said earlier, it's really important to stress the importance of a great group of people around you, because I could not do what I do without these folks around me, helping me leverage ideas I have, taking creative and bringing it to life. Bus drivers driving me to shows, tour managers making sure that when we get there that everything's set up. I mean, it doesn't just happen. And I'm glad you asked me that question, because it's important to make sure that a lot of those folks get the credit they deserve, and no different than y'all, and driving and pit crew teams and people. I mean, you can't win a race without a team there changing that lug nut, as fast as possible and making sure that you get on down the track. So, as you know, when you win, it's a celebratory win with everybody. It feels good to every person involved. And I think that's what life's all about. The more people you can invite into this winning feeling, the better you'll feel about winning. So I applaud a lot of people around me for helping me get to where I am.
I love that. So guys, make sure you guys go check out Saturday night after Coke 600 qualifying. Jake Owen's going to be blowing the metaphorical roof off of Charlotte Motor Speedway. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. Maybe we can fire up some go-karts when you're in town, huh?
Yeah, let's do. I've got a good history on this. I can haul ass, man. I'll put the pedal down.
So that's me. That's my thing too. I can haul ass right to the point of impact.
There you go.
You can bring your steering wheel. Pull her off the wall.
I really appreciate you guys taking time, and I'm even so grateful again for NASCAR including me this weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys.
Absolutely. I'll pop by stage, make sure to put a face with a name, and shake your hand, buddy. Appreciate you coming on.